What's happening? Benton here. Made our first delivery. Now we're the Royal We, 268 miles from drop number 2 in Nashville. This says I'll get there about 12:27. Guess you can add about 30 minutes for pee breaks, and at some point I'll stop and make my lunch. Shout out to the chat. My first delivery this morning messed up the morning stream, especially once they sent me away, not once but twice, because I, quote, got there too early. Hilarious. Spiritual attacks, as we know. Accept the expected with respect to spiritual attacks. So old Benton here, he's getting better at that practice. That weapon certainly did not, neither formed nor prospered this morning. I don't know how much energy I have for this stream. Certainly got a good rest last night. My right shoulder in continuing the healing, continuing to receive healing and restoration by, for, and with the power and meaning in the name of the Lord Christ Jesus. My shoulder's pretty sore. I did quite a bit of stretching and popping as it slowly but surely regains, perhaps for the first time in my adult life, something akin to a normal, that good pain, right? No need to rush off to the medical system to get painkillers or have surgery, certainly. No future in that. Yeah, products of the system, the corporate system. Here's Bloomington, Indiana, proud home of Indiana University. I believe they're #1 in football right now. We won't go into sports, though. I believe they're #1. That's my backup team. I've decided. I was spending so much time in Eugene, Oregon, and in the Ducks. They've been good at football for a while, so I started calling them my backup team. And the Razorbacks, that's over with for them. They'll never be any good ever again. So I'm still a fan. I don't have a choice, but so I guess Indiana's now my backup team. I don't know anything about it though. I don't even bother to watch any of these games. So. I won't be running around happy if they win the championship, but that'd be pretty cool to see. Be interesting to find out what the company has planned for my holiday. It's looking like I'm going to have to take a 34-hour restart, or at least 20 hours. So we'll see. So it might be of some version of Christmas in the truck behind the Food Lion in Charlotte, North Carolina, like that one year, and I ended up doing a live stream that was fairly well received, as I recall. That's when I had my computer equipment, though. In fact, I looked at the map, and I'm passing nearby to where I left my computer equipment. Whether it's still accessible or not is unknown. Thought about it. At this point, I'm not even sure it would. There's some SD cards I wouldn't mind having. I probably should have, since those are so small and take up such little space, I probably should have kept my SD cards. But other than that, it's neither here nor there. I've lost the desire to spend a whole bunch of time and effort setting up a bunch of computer equipment in a big rig like I used to do. Hell, I used to stream while I was driving, talking into it, holding the fucking microphone and with headphones on. Well, that pandemic and the post-pandemic, that was a weird time, man. The computer'd be in the back, you know. I remember one time in a snowstorm near Memphis, well, ice storm down there, the audio's fucked up, and I think my mixer got turned off, or maybe the power plug came out or something. And I just wasn't able to stop. I had to keep driving for like an hour and a half. And for some reason, we still had like 12 viewers the whole time. I'm like, what is this? It's bots? There was just no audio of any kind. What the hell is this? Just watching the road? That was when I was still showing the road, ahead of me. These 360 cameras have gotten so good. It seems pointless to just point the phone at the road, but I wouldn't mind buying one of these 360 cameras, but I can't even get an answer to, does that work with StreamYard on an Android phone or not? I have no idea. There doesn't really seem to be any way of asking that question for whatever reason. Maybe the AI knows. I haven't asked the AI, but I've seen some truckers use some, but for all I know, they're on their channels that use those 360 cameras, and they're probably using computers, I'm assuming, laptop or whatever. So I don't fucking know. Laziness too, just it's way easier to do live streams than try to make videos and do video editing, because it seems fairly pointless. Well, I guess it's a rambling stream. If y'all want to listen to me ramble, I'm not feeling the sermon energy. I'm not feeling the preacher energy. It is interesting to listen to some of these YouTube videos where the people are certainly, some of them are under spiritual attack. There was a black fella talking about the environment of his warehouse job, and he's a intelligent, and I don't know that well-spoken is the right term, but a person who thinks for himself, who's able to articulate, right? Which is, I'm not saying this like, oh, it's a black person who can speak proper English. I can't even necessarily speak proper English, so that's not what I mean. Or I find it difficult at times, rather, or a challenge just to, the proper mouth noises. But this was a self-professed street. Remember Benton? This is Benton as white nigger Cooley, lest we forget. So I'll drop a hard R. But I don't mean nigger in a racist or racial sense. Driven forth as a beast of burden, right? White nigger coolie style. WNCC. Hang on, we're running into a lot of slow drivers for some reason. For whatever reason. For whatever reason. I don't know that I've ever been to Bloomington, Indiana, actually, now that I think about it. I'm assuming I've driven through here at some point. I've been to Evansville. That's the next town. I went there in the 90s when I worked for a national textbook wholesaler, college textbooks. I believe they were called Budget Text. They had a name before that, then they changed to Budget Text. I don't remember what their first name was. They sent me out here to train the staff at a college bookstore how to use our, proprietary inventory management system. Slow or stop traffic, be prepared to stop. Road construction next 15 miles. Oh, goody. Well, I wonder how bad this is going to be, because there was a different route I could have taken that was pretty much about the same distance and time, according to the GPS anyway. So we'll see what they do to us. He's talking about his experiences at this warehouse, and the black fella, I don't know his age, probably mid-30s, I'm just guessing. Because remember, I listen to most of this stuff. I don't really watch a lot of content, whether I'm driving or not. And I'm listening to the whole thing, and it's just like, yeah, brother, this is all spiritual attacks. Everything he's talking about. And, it's reminding me of me, especially, in maybe the year or two before unlocking the achievement of true knowledge of self / self-realization. And, when I had worked on, myself, and was not as triggerable, but would still get agitated and annoyed by certain things. And certainly I still notice a lot of these things. It's like listening to from a few years ago, sort of almost some targeted individual type of talk. And, without using that vernacular or that nomenclature. Is that nomenclature? Yeah, nomenclature, not vernacular. Even like, hey, he recognizes, like, he'll go in the bathroom and there's nobody in there. And then by the time he gets out of there, a bunch of people are in the bathroom, and it's like always the same people. So at a certain point, he's like, are these people just following me into the bathroom? Like, what is this? I'm just like, yeah, man, spiritual attack. And remember, NPC normies normalize everything that is not in some way. They're normalizing him, but they're normalizing people going to the bathroom. I know that sounds insane, but nobody's in the bathroom, and it's normalized temporarily for nobody in the bathroom. He spontaneously catalyst that he reality deja vu all again. So here's the following right behind going to the bathroom, because he's the one that broke the seal on, if it's been an hour or two since anybody went to the bathroom, okay, now he's made it okay to go into the bathroom again. and this sounds nuts, but I promise you, if you I was just getting on a roll too. This is reminding me about StreamYard too. That sometimes it seems like it's conspiring against me, but that's all right. You know, this idea that it's somehow wonderful or desirable to be a human. You know, I don't think it is. I think human is to only operate at the level of a human and not beyond is fairly mundane from what I'm seeing now. It's really describing a person who, you know, behaves in the ways we're talking about here. The NPC normalizer, you know. And I don't know what's going on. There's all kind of highway department people. There's hardly any traffic on this road, and there's the highway department and their salt trucks are parked out here saying road work ahead, and left lane closed ahead, and right lane closed ahead. There hasn't yet been a lane closed, so I don't know what we're doing. It's weird. And so certainly Benton here, your discourser, you know, is way less, or allows himself, you know, does not allow himself to become frustrated nearly as often as perhaps witnessed by what happened this morning with the being spiritually attacked at the first of two deliveries. And that's where I get talk about the idea of accepting the expected with respect to spiritual attack. So I'll finish up this coffee here. Cold brew. And it's interesting because I'm listening to him, you know, by the end of the video, he's like, yeah, I know, because he's complaining about these people at his warehouse job, these NPC, and he's not calling them NPC normies. That's what I'm saying. And he's like, I know some of y'all know about my channel and watch my channel, and you know all of this. It kind of reminded me of a similar attitude. You know, I don't think he realized, and he was talking in some spiritual term. He was saying things like, you know, I still have my soul or whatever. Like, for me, I realized now that this guy probably doesn't realize, but when he's talking that way about them, the spirits are temporarily prospering, right? Now I know he's venting and He's making content. And he's got, I think, like close to 10,000 subscribers. I think that video be 5,000 views or something. Recent video. So, he's probably making, I don't know, $1,000 a month, just guessing, depending on how many videos he makes. Of course, that'll be, that gets squeezed to be less and less over time. Of course. And then he's talking about how he usually doesn't wear very nice clothes to the warehouse job, but then, like, he recently put on his good clothes. And, black people are a little more inclined to, it's not exclusively black, but it seems to be a little more culturally where they'll at least talk about it, wearing Jordans, like $100 shirt or whatever, $400 Jordans, for a warehouse worker, expensive clothing. And, then how some of the women started wanting to try to talk to him or whatever at the job. It's like, yeah, man, here's the thing. It's all comes back to the social media. If she can put out a picture of her and, what she considers to be an attractive man, and he's got on a certain type of branding and fashion, she's trying to extract value out of him. It has nothing to do with anything other than if he's down there in just Walmart clothes, right? She's not going to necessarily want that in her social media picture. But if, she can start seeing him or whatever just long enough to, to help her put more type of image. And it's not exclusive to black people or it's a very American thing at this point, I would say. And, I think different cultures probably have their different versions of that, but I don't even think it's that much different at this point. I mean, if you look at some of the younger generations, just, you'll see white girls wearing, who aren't even ghetto, wearing Jordans or just, trendy athletic footwear, right? It's just normal fashion these days. And I'm not old fogey, old man yells at cloud. I notice stuff like this. The fashion has changed. Of course it has. And I think some of these younger gals, Gen Z and the younger millennials, I think a lot of the guys my age, a lot of the boomers, some of these girls have short hair and they kind of dress a little baggy, but some of them are still fairly, right. Sometimes they're noticing me and I'm like, well, I see you over there, but I'm not even here talking to any of these broads, so I don't know what to tell you, but I might like to talk to them otherwise. Because I think a lot of that just gets put in the so-called liberal or the blue hair, which blue hair is not even the right term. That's historically meant an old woman with a blue tint to her rinse in her hair. So I don't know how that got construed. Now it's blue hair means, DEI or gender type. I think it was gender studies type people is what Chalk Body Outline called it. Which I like that term. That's a pretty accurate term. Gender studies type people. University types. And then that brings us to, I saw some guy from the UK. Actually, it's on my post tab if anybody wants to check it out. And I don't recommend the video, but he talks about he worked for some major investment financial company. And he said, I'm not going to give the name, but you definitely heard of it. So it doesn't even matter. But Barclays or whatever. Who the fuck knows? And so he's telling his whole story of how DEI fucked up his career, which is fine. But by the end of it, and this is the sort of thing that I'm listening to him tell this story, and as a person who listened to the Alex Jones show every day for many years, I have a part of my brain that listens to Alex Jones cover news stories like every day as things were changing. And I have a part of my brain that just sort of fills in the details of, how is that going to manifest in the workplace? So I'm listening to him tell a story, and I'm just like, yeah, of course. What did you think was going to happen? So I'm hearing this going like, the problem isn't the system. The problem is that people like him were happy to go along with it as long as his paycheck was hitting his account, right? As long as he still had his team to manage it. He said, at one point he was basically, probably just below a VP level, I'm guessing. He was like running an entire division, probably like right under a VP. Just, I'm guessing, I don't know. Right below the so-called C-suite level or whatever. I'm still trying to figure out what that term means, but and so by the end, he's like grandstanding almost as if now he's the wise one who's been through the ringer, and he's going to sort of pontificate and give advice to other people, especially the younger generations, to, speak out, challenge the system, and don't just accept things. And so I posted in his comments, I'm like, why are you telling other people to be bold and speak out and resist when while you had a secure job and got a paycheck, you went right along with it? Like, who are you to tell them what to do? Are you crazy? And I framed it a little more diplomatically than that, and that is that Mike and the Mechanics song. In fact, I did an entire episode of my old Nightmare Dystopia podcast where I broke down that I forget the name of that song. It's like Silent Runnings or something. That can you hear me? Can you hear me calling? Can you hear me calling? Can you hear? I don't even remember the chorus. It's something along those lines. Whatever it was. And if you read those lyrics, I did a whole episode on those lyrics, and it says, basically it says go along with whatever the government tells you and hide out so that maybe in the future, basically so that future generations will stand up and fight while we stood still. But I'm listening, and I remember this song. I heard this thing my whole life to some extent, when it came out in the 80s. It's not my whole life, but so I'm thinking to myself, why would the descendants of people who rolled over and acquiesced and just went along with the system, why would they suddenly stand up and fight? And again, that I think it's a nod to products of the system. So the generation that goes along with it, and that they go along with it because they are products of the system, and also the system knows how to incentivize them to go along with it. So why would their offspring or the generations after them, why would those generations do anything different? And, he sort of seems kind of proud of the fact that, especially in the UK, his generation was, he said, perhaps the first generation that was in favor of, some of this, gender-based equality and some of this intersection. He didn't use the terminology, but, intersectionality and all of these things. He said, yeah, we're liberals. We were liberal, He said he equated it to meritocracy, which, the reality is corporatism and meritocracy are mutually exclusive. And he seemed a little, maybe not bitter, but he seemed to acknowledge that when all of these initiatives were being brought in, that most of the actual C-suite was boomer white men. And the next thing you know, they're falling all over each other to declare how much they're in favor of diversity as a strength. And at a certain point, the CEO recommended the white fragility book. And this guy said he read the book. He said, so I read the book, and he said, it's the worst book I've ever read. It's terrible. He said he lost respect for the CEO, but again, he's happy to cash his paycheck until they eventually got rid of him, of course. And then once they got rid of him, he found that he wasn't even able to get another job, at least not. I'm sure he's doing something, but it, certainly seemed to be taking it all in stride. But then hilariously, at one point, he was talking about in the interview process for some fairly high-level job that he was certainly qualified for. And I think that's why he said meritocracy, because I guess he's thinking in a meritocracy, he would always have a job if it actually was competitive. But it is competitive, but just not in the way that he thinks. Because meritocracy, from his perspective, that would serve him if he's worthy, if he's actually performing in a meritorious fashion, right? But this ain't that. So he said at one point they had him prepare a 1 hour long presentation. And I'm just listening to this going, oh, they're getting you to work for free, buddy. That's all that is the people who are, may not even be hiring, and they have jobs and they're interviewing, they're, as part of their job, they do interviews, whether anybody gets hired or not. And some of that also is the race to the bottom, to where they'll interview and interview and interview, and over time, and they'll continue to post the same jobs on Indeed or whatever. But what'll happen is some of it is they're testing the market, and they'll wait around until they finally drop the salary down to the lowest level where they can still get somebody who's desperate enough, who has all the experience and education that they want, to actually take, whatever is the UK's version of damn near a minimum wage job, right? $15 to $20 an hour. Millennial Steam covers that sort of thing a lot on his channel. He talks about this. That in a lot of ways, the way hiring and interviewing is now operating is based on the system is becoming more efficient by figuring out if it searches long enough, eventually it will find somebody to hire, and then who will stick around, who has the experience and the education and can actually, number one, train themselves, because there is no training. It's on the job training. So they have to actually perform, and they're probably going to have to perform in multiple roles, and up to and including janitorial type activities, right? And, humiliation after humiliation after humiliation. And that, as we've talked about, there's simply no end to what the American people will tolerate. So, we can shake our heads and lament whether it ought to be this way or not. Well, it's going to be this way, because this is what people will tolerate, because there's no end to what people will tolerate. Eventually, I'm convinced folks are going to work for free, simply based on a minority of, like, a small amount of advantages. So when I lived in this rooming house in Fort Smith, the guy that managed it, he managed it in exchange for a free room, but it wasn't free because they 1099'd him based on the value of the room. So he actually, that was income. The government says that's income. Hypothetically, he had to pay taxes on that. He probably was still below he's probably exempt and didn't have to file. But if he had other income, he would have to pay taxes on that, right? And how is that the government's business? Number one, and number two, and it reminds me of reading books and knowing a little bit about at least the history of, older America to some extent, and maybe, the UK or London, London, England, or some of these cities where, in a city, it wasn't that, it was fairly normal for some sort of business to have their own building. And then the bottom floor of the building is whatever their family business is. And then they live in that building, and then some or all of their employees live in that building. Right. And, you can then get into a more communal, like maybe they eat their meals they all eat their meals together, or at least out of a common food supply. And then, the pay beyond that, may end up being just really what's required to maybe be able to save a little bit of money and then also buy basic necessities. And then depending on the type of the business, if it's maybe has something to do with textiles, well, it's like, hey, we can, make you some of your clothing or whatever. Right. Or, almost a barter type of thing where, you can produce a certain amount of product and sort of have your own side business, sort of more of a sharing of resources. I see America goes to that in some ways, but certainly just with what is happening economically, especially with the dollar, and it's not a collapse of the dollar, because that's, that talk has been going on, deep into the 80s. And I had an epiphany years ago in a Goodwill, looking at the used books when I was homeless. Didn't really have anything better to do, and I got a lot of quality clothing out of Goodwill store. And especially depending on what city I was in. Found a book from the 80s called basically How to Prepare for the Impending Banking Crisis and Decline of the U.S. Dollar, published in 1986 or something. So, this is nothing. System, these systems are maintained at the level of collapse. That they're maintained within a perpetual state of collapse, especially through these boom and bust cycles, the expansion phase and a contraction phase. And the system itself is starting to speak more overtly about intentionally managing the contraction phase, right? Which some folks misunderstand as, well, they're crashing it on purpose. Well, not really. It's designed to crash. They're talking about managing what they know is going to crash, but it doesn't actually crash because it's maintained within a perpetual state of collapse. So if you drive around your local area, if you see like industrial or warehouses that are still in operation that you can tell were built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s that are now dilapidated, but they're still operating. And I pick up and deliver from some of these places. And I notice them because a lot of times there's really not enough room for me to maneuver, but with the larger rigs of today, well, it's clear to me that when that was built and whoever planned the local area, that was designed to collapse. Right. So it would have been nice and shiny at one time, but only within the culture of the time. Right. To see it now, if that was a brand new building and a nicely landscaped property, to see it with today's eyes, you just see that it's already antiquated and ghetto, and it's not desirable. I've seen like some old films of like Fort Smith, Arkansas or whatever from back in the day. And, back during the time it would have been considered thriving, it still looked like shit. I'm looking at the cars. The cars looked like shit. They were new, but they looked like shit. The buildings looked like shit. The parking lots. Just everything looked like shit. But to the people who were there at the time, it looked all shiny and new. So I'm driving by, these gigantic new warehouses that are being built everywhere. Truck driving is certainly a way to see these things and have kind of a perspective on them. But so it's to realize that, well, in 30 or 40 years, whoever's looking at this, it's going to look like shit. But then to their eyes, even if it was shiny and new, it would still look like shit. It's a perspective. So the system understands that it's constructing shit, and it's constructed to collapse on a timeline. That's the design of it, right? It's built into the design. And then it will be repurposed into something else. Or just, in the case of these industrial areas, like some of this Rust Belt stuff, they'll just let it fall apart. And then whoever eventually develops that land again, they'll deal with cleanup, right? And then crime is going to fester in the meantime. So, that'll be some kind of haven for criminals and ne'er-do-wells and homeless people and drug addicts in the meantime. They got to hide out somewhere anyway. So it might as well be in some dilapidated, falling down industrial or warehouse building in Ohio or whatever. Like, what's the difference? And let's not forget this idea that America used to be great and wonderful. Well, I grew up on 80s movies, which was what was in every 80s movie almost. And this is how they showed danger. The danger of the big city was, at some point there'd be a night scene in the industrial part of the city, and you got bums standing around a 55 gallon drum with a fire going in the barrel, right? And what do we see now? I mean, that's real. That was really happening to some level, right? I understand it became sort of a trope and just, oh, well, that's in a movie, but it's like, yeah, except I'm sure it was really happening also. So, I see that in the modern day. I see that in 2025. So clearly, I would say since at least 1960, it's all the same shit. It's all the same thing. It's just newer, updated versions, and the technology, is rolled out sort of in almost in phases. And then to suit the whatever the purposes are of Moloch's machine of industrial and post-industrial society, whatever needs to be rolled out to the public to suit the system at any given time, that's what gets rolled out. Right. So the reason we all have these affordable mobile computers in our hands is because not because that's good for us, it's because that's what suits the system. And at this point, and I always get a kick out of people who are scratching their heads going, all these. It's like, well, the government's been just giving them away for years now, but also, although that's stopped to some extent, but a very capable pocket computer is available at Walmart for $40. Like, for real, you can get a $40 Motorola phone that can do anything you need it to do. Now, yeah, it's not the best, and it may not be the one somebody would choose, but just about anybody can come up with $40 if they have to. Yeah. That's part of the, what is still in some ways an affluent society. You can talk about inflation, you can talk about the dollar. Well, it buys a fucking shitload of technology, right? I got $25 wireless earbuds in my ears right now. Just more or less because, like, well, they're 20, and I just kind of want to see, are they any good? From what I can tell, canceling is way better than the jet. Maybe the mic. I don't know. The battery doesn't last that long. compared to the ones I'm normally using. And I guess my backup, my emergency set, 10 bucks, $10. I mean, come on, this is crazy. And so the idea of the being, the human, psychologically crafting on an ongoing basis an identity in relation to the system, right? Well, that is to be a product of the system. That's the definition of product of the system, is to first view or to perpetually view the system and what the system does and how the other humans view themselves and each other. It's all in relation to the system itself. And that's to be possessed of and to operate based on a psyche and a psychology, so that each individual being functions as a product of the system. So what I'm describing is a ongoing process of psychological slavery, and also technological slavery, which is the title of one of a compilation of the writings of Theodore John, the Unabomber. Right? I could study that. I really need to. I had physical copies of those books at one time. I no longer have. I read. Just the person of others, right? I'm not the only person with, a unique method, with unique methods of dealing with all of this. And be useful to other people. I don't mind driving. I like living in the truck. But just being relegated to, in order to achieve a goal, or not a goal, but in order to have a big rig costing me money, and in fact, it's killing two birds with one stone in a way. I earn money by driving. There's no actual reason why. There should be somewhere for me to go live, my hermit-like existence, on somebody's property somewhere in a small, very small outbuilding somewhere with electricity and, just enough heating and cooling. But the fact that that's not available to me, on some level, it proves that there is never going to be an effort on behalf of organized to change or overthrow or fix this world. Especially as Americans, it's simply not. It's probably just not allowed. The system probably just doesn't permit. I have to go for myself. Just the effort required, it's not worth it to me. And you get down to preference, and it's like, well, there's really just not enough of an upside. And, the idea of buying or owning land to me is silly, because, the government will take it anytime they want to, and, property tax, and just, it's never been attractive to me. Legally, what if I bought the shed and had it transported and dropped off? And, can I even necessarily get the thing in there without having a road built? And then you get into, the this so-called off-grid living or whatever. But it's like, yeah, I grew up on the motherfucking grid. Yeah, I don't take a lot of showers, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily trying to go do full-time primitive living either. I'm not Grizzly motherfucking Adams out here. I didn't grow up bathing in the creek or whatever. It's just not. I think it's like whimsically attractive to some people. I think it's just like as this romantic notion. It's like, yeah, I'm practically speaking, man, we're modern people, so it's just not a thing. It's really not. And so I don't even, this is not me complaining. This is, I can draw certain conclusions by saying, well, with a mind that works a certain type of way and, having developed and expertly practiced a lot of spiritual tenets and precepts and such, and, now unlocking the achievement of, within this world of death and game of lies, unlocking the achievement of true knowledge of self. What I'm finding is there's really not a place for me outside of the context of, well, the system needs truck drivers and Benton needs a place to lay his head at night. So we'll just sort of put those two things together for now. As I get passed by a big rig called Shalom Transportation. All right, it's interesting. Whatever. And while I spend $15 a day on, it doesn't have to be Mountain Valley spring water, but if I'm spending a ton of money on drinking water, I might as well get some high quality water from Arkansas, where I'm from. I stocked up and they didn't have any. The only Mountain Valley they had was individual bottles, which are particularly not a good deal. So I've stocked up on Fiji. There's a bunch of Fiji underneath my bunk. So if I ever can't get it at the super center, if they're sold out or whatever, I got enough on board for, I don't know, maybe 3 days. And then I keep, 15 gallons of water, just more or less for an emergency underneath there. And there's like 12 cans of black beans. I don't know, like 20 cans of herring. It's interesting. Sometimes I listen to these stories of people who end up in these survival situations. A lot of times, some or all of them die, but it's like almost none of them have any sort of provisions whatsoever. It's like, I have to be insane to be driving around, the country where, yeah, it's unlikely, but all sorts of stuff could happen. It's like, why? And I have enough space and weight, I can carry the weight in the truck, and there's space that would otherwise be unused directly below my bunk. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't I put a bunch of water, basic food down there? It really doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense not to. Even if something minor happened in the stores, and remember, folks, we saw an entire week of no meat section at the grocery store during the pandemic. That was, more or less nationwide. I'm sure there were some exceptions, but it was one solid week of I went in the grocery store and there was nothing in the meat section. And I went to multiple stores and there was nothing in the meat section. And I know immediately people say, "Oh, there was where I live." Like, yeah, well, a third of the audience is hoarder shut-ins, so whatever. And I don't mean my audience; I mean the YouTube audience. It's like, yeah, well, say whatever you want. I'll go with what I see over what other people knee-jerk reaction go. Well, that wasn't like that where I live. Okay, well, good for you. And I don't mean you, the listener. Good for them. So I posted something in a comment similar to this over on Millennial Steam's channel, but it's like, I have a pretty decent income while I'm working as a truck driver. And so I'm, living in this truck and spending my money on quality water and quality food and, a little bit of electronics here and there. Nothing crazy, just, like I bought earbuds, 2 6-foot high, good quality USB cables for charging. And, I bought a little 45-watt AC plug. I've got 100-watt, but it's real big, so I bought one of those. And I recently bought a smaller. I've got a gigantic power bank. I bought a smaller one. And it was probably a little too expensive, but it's only $30. I found a cheaper one later on, but it's quality. I mean, it's quality. It's not a lot of them are El Cheapo. This is a good one. Just over time, collecting little things like that. Clothes, I don't spend a lot on clothes, but it's nice to be able to buy all new underwear and socks and not really have to worry about it, right? A couple of new hoodies here and there. And somehow it's funny with, you got tariffs and people talk about, during the pandemic, the mom and pops all had to close. Again, yeah, I understand not where you live. So some people will say, but, more often than not, while the big corporations got to stay open. And, the fact is I can still go to Walmart and buy a quality hoodie for $20. That's after the tariffs, and it's from Honduras or wherever. Uh, Amazon's, I can still get a halfway decent hoodie for about the same price, maybe a little cheaper. So the money still spends depending on what are you trying to buy, right? Gas prices are not adjusted for inflation. Historically, gas prices are not high. Now, some may say, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, they are. It's like, well, not. It's $1.25 in 1980. So, if you adjust for inflation, that was the highest. It's 1980s. I don't know what to tell you. Compare 250 or whatever. It's always high on the West Coast. That's just how it is. That kind of doesn't count. Even California at around 450, I would argue, is not really that high. It's insane to somebody in the middle part of the country, but it's really not that bad. If you ask me. Certainly could be worse. Ask them what they pay in Canada for fuel. Yes. I think they pay by the liter. Isn't it like $3 a liter or something? I don't know. I have to look it up later. It's like $9 a gallon more. Canadian dollars. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Not sure. I'm not Canadian. At this point, it's like, what does the person have to do to earn the money? I think that becomes the relevant factor. And, what we're seeing is that, people's ability to just work some job and actually be able to buy what they need, unless they can figure out some sort of alternative means of living. So, and some of what gets covered on the internet, and again, I don't really like the channel, this Epic Economist. I've been watching it mainly because Millennial Steam references it a lot, but, it's something I've known about for a long time because I've been homeless more or less since 2012. And this whole van life, car camping, or people just straight up living in tents and becoming homeless. But people who have not yet understood, they don't. I can see in some of these, and some of it is just propaganda. Some of it is just people are making videos pretending to live. It's clear to me that it's like, it's a LARP, right? They don't actually living in a tent. They're just sort of, whether it's for whatever reason, they're making content as if they're living in a tent, but they're not living in a tent. I saw this, like a Gen Z chickie, kind of a, not kind of a cute chick, I guess. And she was doing a full, she was homeless. I watched a few episodes. I'm like, this bitch ain't homeless. Now, if she's just staying with the sugar daddy or whatever, I mean, who knows? But it's clearly she ain't sleeping in her car. You can tell when somebody's sleeping in your car. Like, nah, she ain't sleeping in her car. I'm not saying she has her own place. Yeah. But either way, what I'm noticing is, again, the NPC normies normalize everything that's not incongruous, and it is congruent at this point. Homelessness is so normalized, right? And, what I found to be, I think, and I've had the unique, perhaps unique experience of I chose to adapt to homelessness for my own purposes. And it doesn't really matter why the person adapts to homelessness. Because my experience has been that once a person adapts to that lifestyle, that person is a different person. That person is forever changed. And that's what I would tell people who were newly homeless. I said, hey, man, I don't have any advice for you other than don't adapt to this. Because I said, if you fully adapt to this, you're not going to be the same person. And I'm not even saying it's bad. I mean, some of it's good. Some of it's actually positive. But like, you ain't going to be the same person anymore. And part of that is the first thing the homeless person realizes is, oh, my friends and family will not help me. Now, they sort of will, but in the final analysis, they will not help you. Not in a way that actually represents true assistance. And the fact is, in society, even as more people become aware of homelessness and it becomes more normalized, it's still considered a moral failing. And this is why so many people are in the get a job camp. It's like, and this is, again, the Epic Economist is covering this, and I've known about this for years, but this idea of the working homeless. It's like, well, yeah, I was homeless in 2015, and I knew a lot of homeless people that had jobs. I met a lot of homeless people that had jobs. A job is not a path out of homelessness, and it hasn't been for the entire time I've been homeless. Now, prior to the 08-09 global financial crisis, probably somebody could get one full-time job, figure out how to stay in a shelter long enough to save up enough money and, rent a room on Craigslist, get a roommate or whatever that is, right? And that's probably still technically possible today, but that there would be a lot of ifs and it would depend on a lot of different factors. But and the person would still need to get lucky. And I remember, like, I've seen a few channels where, and have sort of the experiment where, maybe they had a high income, and, you know, maybe some fella in his 20s who was willing to bite off a challenge, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm gonna, basically he was gonna force himself into homelessness, and then he was gonna show that it ain't that hard to go from nothing to successful in America. And I don't remember, and I'm pretty sure I've seen some of these channels, and I don't remember the specific one, but I've heard millennials team talk about it, where all like too into the experiment, guy had to quit for like mental health, whatever. Yeah, it might be possible to go live in a tent long enough to figure out how to remain, access whatever programs they have for employment. Just being able, in my own experience, to have a job and even be able to sleep in a shelter. Because remember, a person who's never experienced any of this is a person who's likely to say, well, you can always work at McDonald's. Like, well, no, you can't. Because when the job market gets bad, the first thing that happens is people hold on to all those jobs. And McDonald's does not want to hire your ass. And if you've been into a McDonald's lately, it ain't white folks working in there. Now, in certain parts of the country, it is. In certain parts of the country, it's black folks, Atlanta black folks or whatever. And if, a honky knows how to, if he knows how to conduct himself, he can probably work in there. But, and the Hondurans and the Guatemalans and all these people, they're nice people, but dude, they don't want you working there. And what I mean is they don't want you as a coworker. And so whoever the franchisee is, that's, in partnership with McDonald's, and they own the business, right? And McDonald's owns the real estate. Let's not forget. McDonald's is actually in the real estate business and the business of selling services to franchisees, and also contractually providing them with, all of this, and fulfillment and distribution, for set pricing or whatever. That's the business McDonald's is in. So the franchisee actually operates the business. They don't want you there. They might hire you in the right circumstance. You can't just go work at McDonald's. That's not true. It hasn't been for years now. It's bullshit. And so the people who think that, they think, oh, well, you can just go to the homeless shelter and sleep there. No, you can't. You got to know where it is. You got to know who do they accept. You got to know what is their process for intake. You got to know what time to be there. You got to know what their rules are. And a lot of them, you can't stay there if you've got a job, meaning your job is going to conflict with what time you got to show up, because you got a curfew now. Now you're 45 years old, and if you're going to keep coming back to the same home night, you got a curfew. I know you got to be there by about 5 p.m. a lot of the time. And I've had multiple jobs. Multiple times I've had a job, and as a grown-ass man, I had to get permission to come in after hours. And in the case of the Portland Rescue Mission, we weren't able to work it out. I never could get a hold of the case manager to get it approved every fucking week. So at a certain point, it just became easier to just go ahead and sleep on the motherfucking sidewalk. It's like, yeah, this is just not, the process was not managed. And probably they just didn't want to deal with it. It's like, yeah, if it's not convenient for us, we're not going to do it, which is a very human thing, right? But again, it's always going to be the gaslighting and bootstrapping of, well, hey, buddy, it's your fault. See, that's the ultimate point I'm trying to make is there's really no way to even talk about this or discuss it or tell people about it, because it's psychologically, again, the psyche that's a product of the system, and it's operating in relation to the system. It's going to think in a way that serves the system. And what generally serves the system is to blame the person. Say, well, I guess you should have done this, that, and the other thing. It has to be the individual's fault. It can't ever be the fault of the system. It's not possible. Well, and I think that's an interesting comment, Mr. Yeah. Well, the fact is that and this is a spiritual warrior type of thing. And so when I refer to myself as spiritual warrior genius, or Benton as perform warrior genius, the reality is I've placed myself into a living situation for so many years that I've already been tested. And if I was able to go insane, that would have already happened. So when you put the ... yet, that doesn't apply, because that's already been tested, sir. And so I'll grant you at least you don't drink your piss. And I understand where we think we're making jokes and we're being cute. And, I can have my own opinion about humor and whether or not that's humorous. And, I can at least appreciate the effort. But now, again, I understand you may not have literally meant Benson. However, again, on some level, all the comments are directed towards me personally, and whether they are or not, and sort of in a thought experiment, right? I can sort of still take that literally and work with it. The fact is, anybody who takes it to the streets without a safety net and just sort of flies by the seat of their pants and figures it the fuck out, they will, they will contend with mental health. And I've talked about it before. I've said it, nobody's homeless for that period of time for no fucking reason. Like, I can say till I'm blue in the face that I chose it and, I had my own reasons. Well, that's all true. However, nobody gets to the point of, even if they choose to go into that, or let's say they're forced into it and then they like it on some level, which is more people than you might suspect who just like it. It's sort of like when I talk about workaholics, or, if you took a disembodied being somewhere and described a vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, some of those beings would be attracted to that. They would want to go there, right? They wouldn't want it to change. They would think it was just fine. Hey, come on in, the water's fine. Same thing with homelessness. Some people don't know anything about it. They get a taste of it, and they're like, hell yeah, we kind of like this. And, that's part of me. Part of me likes it, right? I figured that out pretty quick, but there's no reason to drink pee, though. That's number one. There's no reason to do that. Number two, I understand that would be correlated with insanity in some way, although I think a higher correlation would be with feces, probably, than urine, I'm assuming. Although the reality is, Mark is not necessarily wrong, because I have heard about people getting so spun out on meth that they'll start telling each other, or the voices in their head will start saying, well, a lot of these truckers are on meth, so go find some of them pee bottles down by the truck stop and drink pee. Apparently, thing. I mean, that's what I've heard. Now, maybe that's just somebody making a joke, and then, regardless, I've heard that repeated enough that that's probably a real thing on some level. People, a lot of those meth users do become psychotic enough that and then whatever level they fall to demonically, I'm sure there's demonic spirits who that appeals to, right? So, I don't know that he's trying to make this point, but many people do experience a spiritual decline. And what I've talked about with meth users is I've observed that I've never met somebody who lived on the streets who didn't at least casually use meth. So I understand why people don't believe me that I've never done it. And I've never done any real actual drugs outside of alcohol. Like, and I mean never, like not even once. But and I used to be proud of that, but I realize now it was the Jehovah's Witness brainwashing made me that way. Either way, I mean they kick you out for smoking cigarettes, like for real. But drinking is somehow okay as long as it's in moderation, which is bizarre, but whatever. And you're of age, but not smoking. Although I guess if I had a cigarette from time, and I don't, but I guess if I had a cigarette from time to time, I guess that'd be all right. Just don't let anybody find out. That everybody I've ever observed that uses meth, they all exhibit a decline in their own morality goes down, right? And that just goes with the territory. And then we see why it becomes attractive is it's so dangerous to live on the streets that even without the danger and even without the theft of potentially falling asleep and then somebody stealing the backpack or whatever while you're sleeping in public, or the cops coming along and saying, hey man, you got to go somewhere else. And it's hard to fall asleep and actually get rest in those circumstances. And a lot of, especially when the weather's bad, a lot of people find it just easier to take some meth and walk around all night. I mean, it just sort of becomes just a thing people choose to do that never had a drug history, or maybe only, strictly recreational. Next thing you know, it's like a chicken or the egg thing. There's a lot of that also. And again, everything I'm telling you, I've observed, if not experienced. A lot of what I'm talking about generally I've experienced. So yeah, you can't just necessarily go sleep at the homeless shelter. And then once the pandemic started, most of that stuff shut down entirely, or ceased sleeping inside. That was now, some groups of people, but overall, the idea of an able-bodied, 45-year-old man, in a city like Austin, being able to sleep, in a dorm with 100 other people, bunk beds, in a kind of a jail type of environment, culturally, that shit's ended overnight, more or less. And I was the type that I rarely would sleep in shelters, but I've slept at a lot of different homeless shelters. But obviously for specific reasons. And that sort of got, American lore or whatever is, it's just easier to go place to place at a level of security and not wearing out of one's welcome and all of this. It's just easier to sort of keep moving, which I think is probably evidenced by Orwell's book, Down and Out in London and Paris, or is it Paris and London? I think it's London and Paris. Either way, where in London they had, some of these shelters or places to sleep, but, they kick them out in the morning and then they're basically forced to just walk to the next town because they can't come back to that shelter that night. They can't hang out in that town. They'll be arrested. It's more or less, they're basically forced to march around all day, more or less. It's like, hey, you're going to do something, that they're not just going to let them lay about idly. And what we're seeing is America's, you know, going back to that in some ways where, I think you've always had in most cities just through your hardcore homeless drunk population, right? And we used to skateboard in downtown Little Rock when I was a kid. We ran into some of these drunken bums. I think they all lived in tents down by the river, probably. Of course, we didn't know that, but I'm pretty sure. And then, they'd go panhandle and get drunk. And then the cops, wouldn't really want to deal with them. So as long as they didn't get too unruly and as long as they didn't pass out public, they just kind of let them left to their own devices. And so the climate is reversed. And with some of these recent court rulings, a lot of these cities are now cracking down. And really, it's just going to force the homeless into hiding again. They kind of got to come out into the open, and they're still in the open on the West Coast to some extent. But, if you think Dallas or especially Fort Worth or Little Rock or in these cities are not having it, man. And historically, they haven't had it, Little Rock at one point got voted city meanest to the homeless, right? And that's where I'm from, and I've been homeless in Little Rock. Yeah, they fucking hate homeless people. So does Fayetteville, where they pretend not to hate the homeless because there's a university and there's more lefty liberal types. Oh, they also hate the homeless, I assure you. And I'm not saying they should like them. By the way, they're free to hate homeless people. You don't have to like homeless people. And I've never been in favor of letting homeless people take over. I always thought that was bullshit. I'm like, why are they letting homeless people take over? It's crazy. Round them up. Like in Little Rock, I've slept in the park, in River Market, and there's a cop, and part of his job is he shows up about 5 a.m. and wakes everybody up. It's like, all right, time to get moving. We got, people are going to be using this park in a few hours. They don't want to look at you. And as soon as I hear that, I'm already, I hear the guy and I'm already rolling. I'm already packing up to get the fuck out of there anyway. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to just lay here all day. But I've been in Portland and, 10 o'clock in the morning, some guy's still asleep on the sidewalk. And next thing you know, he's kind of like, hey, man, could you keep it down? I'm trying to sleep over here. And I'm like, yo, man, it's time to get up, buddy. It's 10 a.m. Get your ass up. What are you talking about? You're sleeping on the sidewalk, sir. And I've slept on those sidewalks down there in the general area. It's like, yo, man, what are you talking about? Get your ass up. You're in the way. I know. But this idea of it's my duty to work a job. No, it's not. I wouldn't wish a job on my worst enemy. That's, hard work performed in service of already rich corporations can never be a virtue. And if you look at these corporations, once they get to a certain level, they only operate based on record profits. That's it. Now, yeah, there's exceptions, but almost all of these corporations, they only operate at the level of maximum profits. And whatever they've got to do to ensure record profits for the corporations, that's what they do. It doesn't matter what it is. And if you work for a corporation or even a small business, part of being an American in the workforce is if your job could pay you less, it would. And the moment they can figure out how to get somebody to do what you're doing for exactly what's going to happen, maybe they'll let you keep doing your job for less money. That's what they think of you. What they think of you is they're already paying you the possible. And if things change enough that they can pay you or somebody else less money, that's exactly what they're going to do. And that is capitalism on some level, whether any of us like it or not. Now, I'm not saying communism is better, and I'm sure communism has its own version of that exact same thing. It also operates, with the laws of economics and finance, so it can't be that much different. And as we know, America has its own forms of communism, functionally, and has for, again, going back to the 60s at a minimum. And that's just how it is. It's not, and again, people will want to gaslight and say, well, what's your solution? Or, what about this and what about that? And try to attack me. It's like, yo, if I had never been born, it would all be almost exactly the same. So I can't ever be the problem. My attitude, my tone of voice, the way I talk about the topic, none of that is possibly the problem, because if you remove Benton, the performer, in the context of the performance from the equation, virtually nothing changes, which then proves that I can't be the problem. Although scratch that from the record. Benton's performance is part of the problem, but only a tiny part of the problem, and it's everybody's a tiny part of the problem, because it's the subversion of the creative force of what I am. If enough beings rose to a level of consciousness to where they were no longer capable of perpetuating these systems, then the systems could not continue to be perpetuated. And the reality is, at least at this time, these systems can't operate and continue to perpetuate even at a level of collapse without the subversion of the creative force of individual humans, aggregated, see, which is why the system will not allow enough of the individuals to experience that, rise in consciousness. So then you get into notions around fluoride and the pineal gland, and just and on and on and on. The food supply, various chemicals. Why is everybody kind of I notice a little bit more of a cheery mood, at this time because of the holidays. It's like, well, is that some kind of program? And I'm on a dead exit. And see, this is again unreal. Waking dreams, surrealistic unreality. The moment my wheels started turning on this rig, I'm pulled over on the shoulder on the other side of an on-ramp, the merge area. I look in my mirror and there's perfectly just one car right there. That's not real, man. Not one single vehicle has entered the interstate from that exit or that on-ramp. Right? It's a little thing. It's like the system saying, again, it's like the black guy I was talking about earlier at the warehouse. If that bothers me even one little iota, the system's going to do it. Right? It's never not going to attack. It's always going to attack. Now, part of that is like the attack this morning at the receiver. It'll do it like unpredictably, and it'll sneak up on me. Such as them telling me that we can't. It's 6:20. We can't process you till 7 or whatever. Right. But I promise you, they don't enforce that across the board. Everybody knows if you've got a 7 a.m. appointment at Walmart distribution center, you cannot get there any earlier than 30 minutes before your appointment time. You just can't. And everybody knows it. And they might even reject the load entirely if you get there early, like for real. But it's not for a moment, and enforcement gets more. They don't. or whatever. So if I just accidentally forgot, because it's been 2 years since I went to a Walmart distribution center, they're like, "Oh yeah, you can't. You got to have to come back." Oh, okay, I forgot. Oh, you're right, I forgot. My bad. And then the people's attitudes, because they probably got their ass chewed because they're probably supposed to enforce it week and they don't enforce it, or over time. But there's just no actual reason for them to send me away other than spiritual attack, and you can tell because it's their attitude. And it's just like that place when I first took this job up in Massachusetts that ended up rejecting my load, and you could tell based on the behavior of the people that it was a spiritual attack. It's why they were behaving the way they were behaving. They were real shitty about it. Me taking it's obvious I was going to have a difficult time backing into that. They were happy about it on that basis. It's because they got demons in them. That's what that is. That's people who are infested with demons. Period. So what I think is interesting about Mark Basket and this talking about at least you don't drink your piss yet, it's like, here's what's interesting. What would Mark Basket be like after 10 years of homeless? What would he be like if he, for whatever reason, adapted to a homeless in a city or in an urban area lifestyle, right? What would he be like? Would he be bouncing around in a rubber room somewhere? So that's the thing about old Benton here. Old Benton knows exactly how he reacts to those situations. I have no fear around that, none whatsoever. One of the greatest fears for the working class in America right now is homelessness. That's one of the biggest fears of the people. And one of those Gen Z chicks in one of these TikToks over on that saying, it seems to her like she's apparently chosen to sleep in her car or whatever, her van, for a couple of years now, and she's saving up. She saved up like $30,000. She said she was going to go maybe buy this piece of property and, eventually have her own little tiny home or whatever. Because a lot of people, man, are just over. And so, part of me, I have no desire to go back to living in a house or an apartment. And I mean none whatsoever. Just absolutely none. And I've already been this way for years now. And I'm seeing on TikTok, now you have people, for whatever reason, I started thinking that way on my own. And then other people are now sort of coming around to it, if that makes sense, for whatever reason. But I'm even beyond that now. I don't even want to have a car. To me, it's not even worth it to try to have a car or a van or an RV or a travel trailer. I might be more inclined to do like find one of these so-called van lords in LA, and it's like, yeah, just let me rent the RV for $200 a week or whatever it is. Some fucking rat-infested RV. If I'm willing to fight the rat. But to me, that, and let them deal with it, and I won't have to think about it, because it's like, well, whatever I leave in there and padlock it, it's subject to if the shit gets towed while I'm gone, that's just what happened, right? Same thing with a car. I mean, it's just many people who live in their car, at some point they come back and that shit's just gone, right? It's like, and all their shit's gone. Now maybe they get it back, maybe they don't, It's like, yo, who's trying to live? Part of, people may scratch their head and be like, why is he in Los Angeles sleeping in the car? It's like, well, I found a part of Los Angeles where, at least for that time, I could be reasonably assured they weren't going to tow my ass. And that's not a guarantee, but, you know, I could be reasonably sure. And I know if the cops start coming around putting tickets on my car, and, yeah, they'll probably be friendly to me when they show up, but I'll know, okay, they're really just letting me know to get the fuck out of here. And, go ahead and choose to leave, right? Then I'll drive my happy ass out of there. At this point, I don't even want to deal with the car. Probably I would just end up, because remember, I've tried to quit this truck driving job a couple of times. It's like they won't let me quit. And I still prefer to live. And part of that is I prefer to live in the rig. And they need somebody to drive the truck, of course. And, I can just fly to LA and with a minimum of possessions, and then maneuver through their system. And they've got these tiny home villages. Yeah, it's not going to be a desirable place to live, but it's a door that locks where I can go in there and sleep, which is that, honestly, that's really all I need at this point. That's the only thing I can't really solve on my own, is left to my own devices, is how do I sleep in a reasonably secure fashion where I can get the rest I need every night for my brain to operate properly. That's really my only challenge on my basis. And I don't even mean life. I mean, at a level of subsistence. And that's what people, I don't think, have completely realized, because you'll hear them talk about survival. It's not survival, it's subsistence, which included in the definition of the word subsistence is the word survival, but it's to survive on a minimum of resources. So it's actually, subsistence is to understand that the being is now surviving at a level of minimum access to resources. And people who have jobs and apartments are now understanding, whether they know the words or not, that that's their so-called life is now subsistence. With a minimum of resources. So at a certain point, the car was a tool or a means to an end, right? And then it also went along with the truck driving, because it was like, okay, pretty much other than my first truck driving job, I've always had a car when I got, well, that's not true. I didn't have a car when I got hired with Hawkins, but more often than not, I start the job, I drive to the terminal with, my belongings in the car, and then I, move into the truck. And then when I quit the job, I pack everything into the truck, send them no notice, send them a message. It's like, hey, thank y'all. Appreciate the opportunity, but, moving on. And, it's fine. It's way better than, trust me, it's way better than giving notice. Because that can create a lot of problems for the driver. And, if it doesn't work for me, why would I do it? Because remember, the business thinks that way. The business says, if it doesn't work for the business, why would we do it? Okay, yeah, if it doesn't work for me, why would I do it? If it doesn't work for me to give a 2-week notice, why would I give a 2-week notice? Well, but the point I'm making, Mark, who's now saying, not going to lie, I'm a bad motherfucker. What I'm saying is, if you've never live that lifestyle on an ongoing basis, you don't know how you would react to it. That's my only point. You lack the knowledge of what you would do. When I talk about when the person adapts to homelessness, it changes them. You don't know what those changes are until you experience it. You can guess. You simply have no way of knowing. That's my point. Whether or not you might be extremely good at it. That's absolutely possible. I was pretty fucking good at it overall. Yeah. But my point is, you still have no idea what you're going to be like, and you don't really know what it's going to be like until now you can watch all the YouTube videos you want. Doesn't matter. Until you're in it, you don't know. So back to, the first things that people find very surprising and disorienting is that, number one, their friends and family will not help them, meaning will not provide any actual real help whatsoever. Almost across the board. And then number two is, what do we do with our free time? Because now it's a whole lot of unstructured free time. And many folks, that's the first time in their life when day after day, week after week, month after month, other than, they can get themselves on a routine of, well, there's a community meal at this place on this day, and then there's a closed closet over here, and there's bus passes once a month over there. So beyond standing in line for resources various times a day, there's may not be anything to do, except there's always something that the person needs to do to maintain themselves. Like that's almost a full-time job, maintaining oneself. But however, there's still way more free time than you are used to. Unless, some people, again, are retired. And, I'm talking about, I was 35 when this started. I had no concept overall of what the fuck am I going to do with myself. I took to it quite well. And it turns out I'm the type of person who I'm productive over time no matter what. I will utilize my time productively. It will be in a matter of opinion. Again, America only measures in money. So measured in money, it's not going to be viewed as productive, but productive nonetheless. I can assure you. Why did they have me leave the interstate and I'm going back onto the interstate? Or is that the interstate? I don't even know. I like my GPS, but sometimes it does some weird shit. But the amount of time it would have taken me to really scrutinize this route and make some manual adjustments, it would have been 20 minutes of route planning. It's like, well, I can't be, if I'm losing any time at all, it can't be more than about 5 minutes. So actually, it's just, over time, it's way better to just do what the GPS is telling me to do here. Like Big L used to say, if the GPS can save what it thinks is 1 minute, it will do that. Like, yeah, you're right. It absolutely will. If it can save 1 minute, it will. Well, that's not true, Mark. That's objectively false. I don't have to, Benton doesn't have to do anything but live and die. within the context of this crossroads, heaven or hell realm presently, mostly manifesting as a hell realm. I ain't got to do shit but live and die, motherfucker. So, but I understand you got jokes down there. I get it. If when there's a live chat, we want to chat, right? I get it. I'm a chatter too. Get a little hungry. It's time to find a place to stop and make lunch. Been yapping for an hour and 45 minutes. And it does say something about this, sort of the sardonic kind of above it all, very American view of just, many different phenomena to just sort of view things kind of sarcastically and sardonically in a sort of a detached above it all way. And I've probably fallen into that at times myself. Well, I understand. I get it. And of course, it's a cope just like everything else. Looked at in the proper way from the proper distance. I mean, what's not a cope? It's all a cope on some level, seemingly. Cope. Well, coping with what? Again, vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of lies, and always reconciling or failing to reconcile for waking dream, surrealistic unreality, at your own peril, right? Deja vu all over again. At your own potential peril, I should say. At one's own potential peril. I don't know if I want to eat yet or not. There's a little truck stop. Let's see, when's the next? Looks like we got one north of town here. This is Evansville, I believe. Yep. Let's see what this truck stop is up here. Oh, wait a minute. That is not a truck stop. Yeah, it is. It's a truck stop. Unable to retrieve information. My ass. Better get on it. See how far away this thing is. 15 miles. 31 minutes. That can't be right. Yeah, it's because I'm not up to speed yet. Looks like it's already giving me different routes. It's rerouting me. For some reason. Or is it? Okay, I see what we're doing. It's just giving me an alternate. Okay. Yep, we're sure going through. Looks like we're going nearby to the town where my computer equipment could still be. I don't know if it's there or not. It doesn't even really seem like worth dealing with it to try to retrieve it at this point. What's up, Christos? Glad to hear that. Christos listening as he starts his day. What's happening, man? Now I got too many clothes up out here. Greenhouse effect. Stop and take off some of these layers. Oh, we gotta make a turn. Left turn in 1 mile. What is this? Airport? Little airport. Hell, I probably flew into this motherfucker now that I think about it. Evansville Regional Airport. I think we might have flown into Cincinnati, actually. Drove the rest. Rented a car and drove, probably. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Yeah, we go through Cincinnati next. Remembering correctly. Or do we? That might have been if I went the other way. I don't remember. It's funny, I don't really remember this town. The only thing I really remember is we stayed in a hotel, me and my coworkers, and this was a different time. They had me in a hotel room, and the company's in Arkansas, so this cheap Arkansas culture, they was in a room with a female, which seems bizarre in retrospect. That was the 90s, I guess. Who was technically, my superior, the team lead or whatever you want to call it. I was like 24, maybe 23. I was still young, man. I walked to a gas station or something at some point, but now I'm trying to think. Maybe we did. I don't think we had a rental car then. I'm not sure what the fuck. Maybe I couldn't rent a rental car. I'm not sure. I didn't have access to drive a rental car. It's been so long, I can't fucking remember. I guess I'm in the wrong lane here for turning. Yeah, some of these intersections you can't tell that both lanes are left turns. Now everybody's got to act like they're pissed off because I made a turn from the wrong lane. It's like, yo, man, I didn't see a sign. And yeah, I understand that y'all are from here, and probably there used to be arrows on the ground. They're not there now, so I don't know what to tell you. Or sometimes they just do it anyway. It's one turning lane, and people just drive as if it's two turning lanes. Sometimes that happens also. But I like this performative thing where now they're all going to act like I've inconvenienced them. All right. Okay. Whatever. But yes, for some reason, a carload of strippers stopped and chatted me up. Must have been like we weren't working Saturday or something. I didn't have shit to do, and I was walking around. Carload of strippers pulled up on me. I kind of felt like they might make me into their mascot at a certain point. I just told them I think they just wanted to know what the fuck I was doing walking around. So, here on work, blah, blah, blah. Y'all have a good day. Oh, we're strippers, or we're this, or I don't know what they were telling me. And nothing against strippers. I guess they were trying to figure out if I had any drugs. I mean, I said, looking back on it, that would have been most likely what they were on about. I'm assuming. Well, I have NFL first team I have first team all NFL white receiver genetics. I never really played football, and certainly never played in the NFL. I have I'm a direct descendant of a first team NFL All Pro wide receivers. Whatever that energy is, assuming that's a good thing. Now I'm 50, so I'm a 50-year-old hermit. So now I'm just prefer to be left alone most of the time. Of course, this also shows the so-called. You can always trust the so-called truth community's mind to be in the gutter. Now, I'm not even going to read Mark's comment. Not that it's inappropriate. It's kind of apropos of nothing. But and not to accuse him individually, but because it's not just the so-called truth community. It's pretty much all communities at this point. Perpetually mind in the gutter. That's become the culture. You know, folks, especially who blame liberals and want to act like half the country is morally wicked and depraved and the other half isn't. It's like, well, I don't know, man. What I see from pretty much all groups of people is mostly folks who got their minds in the gutter. But whatever. It's just telling me I'm making a left turn. I'm not making. Oh, wait a minute. Just got me doing some weird shit. I see what it's doing. My GPS is confused on how to drive into this truck stop. So I see. Sometimes that happens. Yeah. Feel free to try again another day, Mark. Today is you're having a bit of an off day, perhaps. A bit of an off day, perhaps. Certainly within the realm of possibility. These, some of these things must be considered. Alas, I believe the stream will be most likely coming to an end in the near future when I get to this truck stop in 7 miles or whatever it is. Make my lunch. Take off some of these layers. Yeah, Evansville seems to have a lot of roads for the population. There's a lot of big ass roads in this town. All right, I guess I'm out. Thanks for watching. Bye.